Hello everybody, it is Mike Levin driving under the Henry Hudson Bridge on the West Side Highway of Manhattan. I'd love to pick up a camera and turn it around so you can see some of the scenery here, but I'll just drive and shoot my videos. Excellent example of multitasking, right? They say humans aren't really good at multitasking, but driving would not be as popular as it is if people had to lock fixed on that. It taps very different parts of your brain to do this sort of driving than it does to think and talk. Well, I should say talk. I'm barely even thinking. Thinking works at so many different levels, the conscious level and the prefrontal cortex, and then your automatic, muscle memory, subconscious level. And that's been the subject of so much of my, focus lately. It's always been difficult for me to imagine what I would bring of unique value to the world. The world is full of these people who have done these monumental, mammoth things and have really changed the world. And then I think, the ones who have really done it best in the way that have touched my life the most that I'm aware of are themselves actually copycats of a sort. Linus Torvalds copied Ken Thompson, who copied certain concepts of a giant corporation endeavor called Multics. So it went from, this General Electric massive multi-million-dollar time-sharing software, highly regulated system of Multics to anything goes, Linux. Remix it any way you like and load it on, wristwatches and have completely disconnected from network instances doing autonomous tasks. So, that was greatly, you can't attribute it all to Linux and Linus Torvalds, but he definitely gave the green light for that whole, operating system, generic operating system that adheres to all the stuff computer science people love, commonplace. And then there's Guido van Rossum, who did Python, who himself was riffing off of a prior language that was actually made to be accessible to the learner, to the noob, the beginner. And that was called the ABC language, capital A, capital B, capital C. And there was another guy who did the ABC language, and that's not completely what, inspired Python. It has a lot of other stuff blended in from the C and Unix worlds, but there, C and Unix, he was combining three powerful alliances, connecting the dots between three crazy, ready-to-meet, domains. The domain of easy, accessible software, because that lets people flood in. The domain of C programmers, because that lets pure wizardry and optimization down at the lowest levels still reasonable on today's hardware for drivers and number crunching stuff. And it also unifies the Unix sysadmin, which is separate and distinct from the C programming type. They're not, I would say, not as particularly creative, because C people are creating it out of nothingness, and sysadmin people are keeping all the machines running for everyone. So you take these three very different, approaches to the world: the noob, the hardcore creative, and the keep it running at all costs. Combine them together, you got Python. So I put Guido and Linus up on this, pedestal, the type of people worth admiring and emulating, and also with their humility. A story came out recently that the richest tycoons in tech are now trillionaires. Bill Gates still topping the list, but Mark Zuckerberg, with a recent 35% Facebook stock surge, is now a trillionaire as well. And I think to myself, who's happier in life, the Zuckerbergs and the Gates, or the Torvalds and Van Rossums? And there's no question in my mind, which would you rather walk down the street as? My daughter asks me sometimes, would you rather be rich and famous, or just rich? And I'm like, rich and famous, because famous is a curse, and I would certainly not like to have the downside without the upside. Rich without famous, sure, you could possibly transition it or segue or, otherwise convert it into wealth, but to start out with some resources in your pocket and to not have fame is best. But it's also the harder way, because that means you're not leveraging your fame for your wealth. You have to just create economic product out of nothingness. And I always was like, I'm not going to be a doctor, I'm not going to be a lawyer. These things which are these top tier, people put so much trust and faith in these professions, and it takes, years of school, a decade or more of school. Never my style. I like to immerse myself, and boy, I think how well I would have done in today's world where the internet is so enabling. So many key things that I should have probably had access to and known about at a young age. I didn't, because who was going to guide me? Public schools, my mom and my dad. They were not really that clued into this stuff. My dad tried here and there, but by trying, I ended up with a Coleco Atom because Honeywell was in my backyard who repaired it, instead of a Commodore 64, while Commodore was in my backyard, the very company who produced it, whose founder himself was a Holocaust survivor. And I think had my dad known the whole story, he would have found a way to make me a Commodore person at a much younger age. As it happened, I came along while the Amiga hit the scene, and a whole nother set of people who I elevate to this high level. There's people who can just think things through, with hardware registers and logic gates, and the hardest core people in the industry create their creations from metal. Where do they make it from? They burn it from sand. They draw with, markers, essentially, something like a Sharpie marker, onto something called rubylith, and they cut out the rubylith and they lay it over photographic film, and the photograph gets reduced and reduced and reduced until it's almost this, nanoscale image, which is used then to burn silicon wafers to create the layers and the levels. And talk about doing things at the hardware level, hitting the hardware. People like Jay Miner, another one I'd put in that category, the person who was partially responsible for the Atari 2600 that created the home game industry for all intents and purposes, also known as the VCS, I guess, to the Europeans, who was also responsible for the Amiga computer, where my heart was. And it had a lot of Unixy stuff around it that was put there by Dale Luck and RJ Michael and the software people involved in the Amiga, which led me into this world that I occupy today at really what is a junior level. If you had to put a label on what I am, I'm a fairly junior level programmer. I've been in SEO, search engine optimization, forever, but that is sort of a fuzzy field because it changes so rapidly, and it's about anticipating what Google's going to do and to get out ahead of it. It's not anything like a field like being a doctor or a lawyer, where even though you still have to learn, it's a hard field. It's a field where there are things that are fairly well known, fairly unchanging over time. And whenever you have anything where certain things are fairly unchanging over time, muscle memory kicks in, back to the whole driving while talking thing. Here I am driving in Manhattan. I'm now turning onto 11th Avenue, following Google Maps, taking a fairly different route than I would have expected. I avoided the FDR this morning, which is the east side, by driving down the west side, which is hardly a highway. When it gets down here to the Manhattan area, it's just becomes stop sign after stop sign. So if there's traffic, not stop signs, but traffic lights, if there's traffic on the west side, Google Maps shifts you over here to something like 11th Avenue, which I'm on at 56th Street. So I'll be going down the island of Manhattan and cutting over close to where I'm going to park for work. So muscle memory, you know, you hear these stories everywhere, you know, surgeons who are so skilled that, you know, they get into the zone when they do their surgery. If they had to think through the things they learned in textbooks while they had you cut open, you know, not good situation, you might die. And you see this everywhere, you know, of course, professional drivers, cab drivers in New York City. Oh my God, driving New York City itself is like surgery. It takes this years-long one skill. And cab drivers just drive from any point to any other point like it's no big. And so it's because, you know, cars are a tool, and, you know, generally speaking, where steering wheels are and how gas pedals work and all that stuff doesn't change. In tech, everything changes, right? Not everything, but we're even struggling to keep a keyboard, you know, so that you can continue to use it. The latest generation of Macintosh laptops, not so much to my liking, because they've become so paper thin. It's eliminated even a little remaining tactile feedback that was there in their little low profile keyboards on their well, I was going to say on their laptops, but it's even for their main Macs. The detached Bluetooth keyboards are also those low profile, low velocity. I forget the official terms, but I like those clicky, those loud clicky things. It's part of muscle memory. It's part of getting into the zone. But I can live with the old Mac keyboards, not so much the new ones. But that's just one example of where things change on you in tech all the time. Sometimes suddenly, like the shift from old school Microsoft active server page to more modern .NET. And that's a place where I couldn't make the transition, even though Microsoft tried quite emphatically to move everyone over. They were responding to the much bigger threat of Java. Now, the thing there is that Java looked like it was the future of programming. All this, you know, write your code once, run it anywhere, and these large common libraries of grab bags of stuff. And, you know, it was a threat to Microsoft, but Microsoft's recalibrating all their tech in response to that basically lost the people who were the noobs, the people who just wanted to get on board, do something productive in their own lives, maybe not build a tech empire. You know, I turned and went looking and realized how badly I was afflicted by the repeated loss of muscle memory. First, I lost my muscle memory from everything Commodore and everything the Amiga, all those languages that I learned there. AREX, while still applicable today, and REX. No one would, you know, mainstream themselves on REX when languages like Ruby and Python are available. These pauses are me listening to my GPS telling me what to do. So, yeah, I guess this lane is best. This is where the heavier traffic starts to happen. It said it was only going to take a half hour to get into near where I work, which is amazing. Faster than the train. Driving into Manhattan is faster than the subway in the morning at 7:30. Amazing. If it was cheap to park down here, I might do that more often and build up my muscle memory and my confidence for driving the city. So, you know, putting in your 10,000 hours, whatever that book is, was it a Malcolm Gladwell, 10 years or 10,000 hours, whichever comes first, more or less true. It takes a while to become expert. It takes a while to build up the muscle memory. And then when you have it, you're something like a spontaneous expert in some fairly complex, difficult thing. Maybe not surgery, but certainly coding, using a keyboard, thinking in a programming language, using a programming language as if it were your primary spoken language. And that's a big deal. And even that will have the reset button hit on you if what you're mastering is JavaScript libraries and the particular API syntax of JavaScript libraries. A lot of people are running onto React.js these days. the carpet's going to be pulled out from under you, and what's left is, well, JavaScript, which is not bad, but it's, it's hard. I find it hard to think in JavaScript. For item in collection is how you would express iterating through a collection of items in Python. I'm not even going to tell you what it is in JavaScript because it involves filtering out a prototype class that's left over in every collection, which in certain cases it's a benefit, it's a good thing. You have a prototype class to derive from, but in every other case, which is the majority of times, you have to create all this extra code to filter it out, and it makes it ugly to look at, where it's just 2 lines in Java. It doesn't even have brackets to contain it. It's 4 item in collection, colon, indented, what you're gonna do for each item in the collection. So muscle memory actually kicks in with Python at an earlier point than it does with other languages, and you still got to put in your time. And I started on Python in around 2010 when Addie was born, and I wanted to do something big, and I crammed it all into 1 year, and I did all this stuff that I called Tiger for a company called 360i, the one who said you can still dunk in the dark, and tweeted during the Super Bowl, during the blackout. Well, I think it was 2012, that was their claim to fame. So, I mean, they're still actually brilliant marketing company. Recommend using them and everything. But that was 2010. It's 2017. So I've been on Python now, for the most part, for 7 years, but not as a full-time programmer, just as the language I picked up when I did things. And I tried to force myself to have large-ish projects now and again to sort of sharpen the saw. That's what I call it. You do your SEO stuff, you do consultancy, you do PowerPoint, and then some tech project comes up where you go, oh, I can do that this way. It's much more efficient than doing it in Excel, something that might take a whole day to correlate in Excel and to do VLOOKUPs between different tables. Just doing Python by saying pull from this data source, that data source, that data source. This is the column I'm joining on, join them, and inner, outer joins, all the SQL stuff, as if your data was residing in a SQL server with all the scripting stuff to say what to do with that data, how to put it together, and then just drop it into an Excel-like spreadsheet. In most cases, for me, it's Google Sheets these days because it's got a nice, easy web API that's always there. And it's like magic, just running these scripts and manipulating things around. But then I also took up all the things you need to do to keep those scripts running on a reliable basis, and to deal with failures and API flakiness, and so I guess where I'm going with this whole talk and discussion is that by moving things from the realm of always having to think about it every time you do something over into the realm of muscle memory. And of course this applies to so many things in life. Anyone who plays a musical instrument does this, anyone who uses a weapon in martial arts does this, and even just physical movement with dancers and athletes, and certainly with tech people with keyboards. Muscle memory is important. I should say writers with language. As writers are typing, you're not thinking, what is the English language and what is the syntax I should be using? You just write. Such as it should be with coding, at least at first, to flesh things out, to be expressive. And my system these days, because I've fallen in love now with both Jupyter Notebook and Vim, the text editor, the text terminal-based text editor. I experiment in Jupyter Notebook, I try little things, and then I move it over to .py files in Vim. So I move it from notebook files, IPYNB files in Jupyter Notebook to Vim, to text, to .py files in Vim. And once they're in the Vim file, I do, or the text file, I do whatever additional refinements I need, and that's where it goes into scheduling. So experimentation, explore on the Jupyter Notebook side, scheduling and refinement and optimization, exploit on the text file side. Explore, exploit. Jupyter Notebook, Python, in Vim, through the text interface. And between those two things, it really is a forever improving and smoother process. I would like to do the explore stuff in Vim, and sometimes I do, but the truth is the way Jupyter Notebook runs in the web browser, keeping the states of your variables resident in memory even after the program stops running, it's even different than what's called an IDE, an integrated developer environment, which is also popular, and tons of people use PyCharm or some other variation of that for a lot of the stuff of what I'm talking about. But muscle memory, man, PyCharm I lump right in there with Sublime and TextEdit and CygnusEd and all these custom, commercial editors that just, for some reason or another, the world changes too much, they disappear, and that decade or more of muscle memory you build up just becomes gone, of little to no more use. Whereas if you create those same muscle memories in Vim, first of all, muscle memory in Vim is very cool. It's just like you see hackers in the movie, making awesome things happen as fast as you can move your fingers. If you want to look like hackers in the movie, Vim is a good place to start. It's like playing video games to edit a text file in the good way. Not with joysticks and stuff, but with keyboard combinations, and not too many of the Alt-Shift-Control combinations that give you carpal tunnel syndrome. For that, you use Emacs. In Vim, you simply remember the language of Vim. It's like a language. It's like English. VIW for view mode, highlight the word, and then you can just start typing and replace a word. Anyway, you got to see it to understand it. You can do, once you understand the phrase for replacing a word, you can also replace a paragraph or even a whole page in the same way. So you're like, you got your cursor on something, and you're like, oh, I want to reformat that paragraph. Oh, I want to change that paragraph with other text. I want that whole paragraph on a single line. Of course, putting it on a single line is the kind of stuff you wouldn't have to do if you weren't dealing with hard wraps, but now I'm rambling. Vim is like a martial arts weapon for a tech person that's always on you, always can be found around you. It's like choosing the quarterstaff or something as your martial arts weapon, because you can always find a stick. And sure, a stick might not be the most optimal weapon for every situation, but you're always going to find one, and you're always going to be able to apply your muscle memory to fighting with it. Whereas finding like nunchucks or a sword is much less likely. And IDEs and, IDEs are kind of like the sword or the nunchucks. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. I grew up saying nunchucks, but I learned it's like nunchaku or something. I don't know. Well, anyway, another digression. Specialized means vulnerable. Specialized usually means better, faster, able to charge more money for what you do, but just like how large mammals or large animals like woolly mammoths fill an economic niche that is vulnerable when their food source goes away. And when they go away, the other specialized animals like the saber-toothed tigers go away too, because the large prey they feed on goes away and everything collapses. And that's kind of like analogous to losing the muscle memory. Or if you're more of a generalist and can survive in any situation, you might need to work a little harder in situations where other people's with power tools and the specialized equipment can just slam it out and be finished much more quickly, but they are more susceptible to volatility. So, their strategy is win big and bank it, win early, bank it, and cruise on it for the rest of your life. Whereas a generalist is, earn at a more modest level, be more junior level your whole life, but, disruption never really bothers you. In fact, after a while, you kind of really like it, and you end up driving through the city to get to work to pick up your kid after camp during the summer to have a week-long vacation with them, able to go out anywhere, do anything, where people really aren't going to recognize you, and you still have money in your pocket to do all the wonderful things you want to do. And that's a much better place to be in my mind and for my time, for my 10,000 hours, than to try and make a big flashy, event in your life that makes you famous, lets you bank a lot of money, kind of like the whole startup thing. But anyway, I am just about to where I should park. I think I'm going to park here, actually. Yeah, someone's honking at me because I didn't think to take this lot quick enough. But this is a good spot, right near work. Maybe about $10 more for the day than I'm going to need to spend, but right by the office, and I see a spot open, so that's good. Muscle memory, remember that. You can adapt to new situations more quickly and choose your tools carefully so that your muscle memory lasts you a good 10, 20, 30 years, not just until, things change enough so that, those upper levels in the abstraction thing change. Upper levels always change. Windowing operating systems went to mobile. The next thing's going to happen. But Python will always be there underneath running the show. And sometimes also Google's Golang. So that's worth it as well. Thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you soon. And don't forget to subscribe.